Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is our second to last meeting. So I want to remind you that if you haven't updated your assignments, please make sure you do so. I also want to remind you of your upcoming test. I'll be emailing you. You have a final exam. There'll just be some questions to answer. However, I do want to remind you that you do have some assignments, some of you are missing. Remember, if you don't do your assignments, they become a 0. We don't want any of that. Today we're going to be going over a play called Oediipus Rex. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about different types of speech within drama. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, but we're going to revisit it again. It's always good to revisit things. Okay. All right, so this is from Legit. These are the different types of drama and literature with examples and explanations. There's 4 major types of drama: comedy, tragedy, tragicomedy, and melodrama. So tragicomedy would be that type of comedy that is tragic, but yet is funny. These are the different types of originated different times, but each of them has its characteristics. However, all of them have a place in modern culture and should be appreciated. There's 4 types of drama. Comedy. Comedy is a type of drama that aims to make the audience laugh. It's a tone of light and is mostly a happy ending. The classic conception of comedy came from ancient Greek theater, where comedy first emerged as a form of drama. Tragedy. Tragedy is the type of drama in which the protagonist or hero is brought down by his or her flaws. Murder, death, insanity, and pain are among the most common ideas in tragedies. Main characters usually have some kind of weakness or defect that causes their downfall. Tragic comedy. Tragic comedy is a special kind of drama that combines the features of tragedy and comedy. This means that such a play may be sad, but will still have an ending. Or it may be serious with some elements of humor emerging throughout the whole play. Melodrama. Melodrama is the last one kind of horror in the drama. It's kind of drama in which everything is hyperbolized. Usually themes depicted as melodramas are simple and without any unpredictable plot twists. So what is drama? In English literature, drama is the portrayal of fiction or nonfiction events through the performance of writing dialogue. To define drama in simple terms, it simply means stories are brought to life by actors and events on stage. The definition of drama, according to Aristotle, is poetic composition by an audience at the theron. So the combination performance, music, dance, props, etc., the audience is able to feel like a part of the action. This is what makes drama genre a unique genre of literature. Of course, you can also read drama in a form of written play. However, you can only get the full impression of what the author intended to show when it performed. Drama can also be performed in films or radio. Some people like the anime genres. So the different types of drama in literature, we want to understand what the drama is in literature. The understanding of different types is necessary. There are various types of drama, but only 4 main types of drama we examined below. There's comedy, tragedy, tragicomedy, melodrama. These contain different characteristics of drama, which include the plot, characters, music, dialogue, etc. There's comedy. Comedy is a type of drama that aims to make the audience laugh. Its tone of light is mostly happy ending. The classic conception of comedy came from the ancient Greek theater, where comedy first emerged as a form of drama. Comedy can be either divided or subcategories. For example, lampoon, farce, satire, or black comedy. Each type of comedy has an audience. Interesting. Each preference may depend on the cultural background of the people. Then you have tragedy. It's a type of drama with the protagonist as a hero brought down by his or her flaws. Murder, death, insanity, and pain are among the most common ideas in tragedy. So today, our story is Oedipius Rex, and that's considered a tragedy. The main characters usually have some kind of weakness or defect that causes a downfall. Tragedy first appeared in the theater of ancient Greece. Like comedy, it lived through the Roman Empire, medieval times, Renaissance, and other eras. The aim of tragedy is stated by Aristotle to create a release of a certain emotions from the audience, to arouse them a sensation of pity or fear, and they leave the theater with an understanding of the ways of good gods and men. Right here we have the audience catharsis is brought to you by witnessing some disastrous and moving changes in the fortunes of the protagonist. Tragic comedy. Tragic comedy is a special kind of drama that combines the features of tragedy and comedy. This means that such a play may be sad but will have a happy ending, or may be serious with the elements of humor emerging throughout the whole play. Unlike comedy and tragedy, tragic comedy emerged a bit later in times of the Roman Empire. Roman dramatist Politus was the first to write the tragicomedy and then use the term. In his play, Antiphrium, he used the lightness of the comedy that chose the gods and the kings and the main characters. It was quite revolutionary of him. Before Platerus, there were strict rules about writing drama. It was either a comedy or tragedy. These genres were never mixed. Platerus was the first to note in our daily lives. We have features both tragedy and comedy. Melodrama. Melodrama is the last one of the four types of drama. It's a kind of drama in which everything is hyperbolized. Usually the themes are depicted through melodramas. They're quite simple and without any predictable plot twists. There are quite a lot of stereotypes such dramas. Melodrama was originated much later than comedy, tragedy, and tragicomedy. It first appeared in France in the end of the 18th century. Later, it reached Britain and became one of the most popular types of drama in the 19th century. Particularly the 19th century was a period when melodrama was the most popular kind of theater entertainment and was visited by a vast number of people. This is because those times theater became available for common people. As melodrama was aimed at the layer of society in particular, it became immensely popular among artisans and the working class population. The influence of melodrama on society is so great that it lived in our days and even penetrated other areas of literature and entertainment. What are the elements of drama? Having learned that there are two types of drama, there are certain elements that play that's meant to be performed. They must have to do a lot with the quality of drama. Major elements of drama include the plot, the theme of the plot, character, dialogue, settings, performance, music, and visual effects. Right here, this is a play. This is the plexus.com UGC picture. There are major elements of drama and functions in the play. The theme. The theme of the play refers to the central idea. It can either be clearly stated through a dialogue or action, or can be inferred watching the entire performance. The philosophy that forms the base of the story or moral lesson is the characters learn. A theme, in simple terms, is what the play is about. It's a message or lesson that the writers of the play want the audience to learn. For example, the theme of the play could be about unforgiveness destroys relationships, or how love can bring people together regardless of their race or background. Plot, in simple terms, the plot can be a chain of events in the play. Essentially, the play is a story that the play narrates, a sequence of the events. The plot usually begins with exposing the past or the background of the main and other characters, or the point of conflict. Then proceeds to give the central theme or climax. Generally, the story begins with exposing the past or background of the main or other characters and the point of conflict, and then proceed to give the central theme or climax. Then the climax in the play ends with a conclusion. Characters. The characters in the roles or the actors in the play The main character of any play is protagonist and the antagonist. Characters include people, animals, and figures presented in literary work. Depending on the character development, the character can be dynamic, static, round, or flat. Dialogue. Dialogues between the simple terms and the lines the actors perform in the play. The story is narrated to the audience through the interaction between the characters. Here's some people that are practicing their lines for a play. The context of the dialogue and the quality of the delivery have a major role in the play of the impact that the play has on the audience. It's through dialogues between characters and the story can be understood. Dialogues also help reveal personalities of the character and help the audience understand characters more. Monologues and soliloquies are also important as dialogues in the play. There are speeches that actors give to themselves that are directed to the audience in a play setting. The time and the place where a story is set is in one of the important parts. The era of time in which the incidents in the play take place. Stage design and costumes are some of the ways that the place and the time settings are the play are portrayed. Performance. This is how the actors give life to the characters that are written on paper. How well do they portray their characters' personalities determine how well the play will be taken to the audiences. Music. This element includes use of sounds and rhythm and dialogues. It also includes music compositions that are used in plays. The background score, songs, and sound effects are used to complement the scenes and the characters in it. Music also helps to portray the emotions of the scene and the audience. Visual element. The visual element to drama, also known as spectacle, gives a visual appeal to the stage setup. The costumes and the makeup of the characters are also parts of the visual elements. Visual elements help the scenes to be dramatic enough to hold the audience's attention. I love how they have pictures of different people actually in their performance. Apart from the major elements listed above, the structure of the story, the use of symbolism and contrast, the overall stagecraft are some of the other important elements necessary for any good drama. But there are different types of drama. A combination of these different types is often seen in most plays. All right, so these are the elements of drama. This is by Miss Alicia. Drama is basically a story being acted out for an audience. Many elements are involved to make this possible. Like a cast of characters, these are the people that actually play. Two types of characters, remember, the good guy or the bad guy. We have protagonist. You have the antagonist. The bad guy or someone against the protagonist. There are a lot of other characters in plays too. So who writes this stuff? The playwright. The playwright writes it. Like an author. There has to be a setting. Where? When? With who? The characters need to talk. Okay, but they need to be doing something. We'll give our actors some stage directions. Eric runs off the stage and lets the script loudly with frustration. Nathan talks on the cell phone, ignoring everyone around him. Ishan flexes his muscles for the ladies. All this is good stuff and is organized into acts and scenes. Romeo and Juliet, Act 1, Scene 1, Scene 2, Scene 3, Scene Act 2, Scene 1, Scene 2. You got an idea? And those are the basic elements of drama. Thanks for watching. Okay, so that was by Miss Alicia. But remember, we here in the United States have something called Hollywood, and it's located in Los Angeles. Many of you have been there. They have really cool things like wax museum. I've been there. They have like walking through the stars. You can walk on the street and see the stars. Then they have tour bus. I don't know. Of course, I've done all that. And they have cool places to eat, like the Hard Rock Cafe. So you are familiar with Hollywood. But in Nigeria, they have Nollywood. If you go to places like India, they have Bollywood. So different places in the world have something similar to Hollywood where they have movies too. And because we have things like Netflix, we're able to watch it. Netflix, Hulu, Vudu. What's the other one that's popular? Oh, there's Amazon Prime, and there's a couple other ones. So you can always get movies from other countries to watch too. Oh, Alice in Wonderland. What a fun play and movie. I've watched many of these plays. I actually had a themed birthday party back on March 1st of 2020 as my last birthday party. And I did Alice in Wonderland theme. It was a lot of fun. But I was Tim Burton's Alice. My friend was Disney's Alice. This girl right here is Disney's Alice. You can always tell by the dresses. So symbolism is a device in which an object, person, or situation is given another meaning beyond the literal one. Usually something more abstract or non-rational of the symbol itself. There are many kinds of symbols. Normally, dramatists weave clues into the work to indicate different elements intended to be taken as symbolic. There are two main categories of symbols: universal symbols and contextual symbols. Universal symbols have a meaning across many different works. For example, snakes often express cunning and treachery all through literature. Contextual symbols, on the other hand, only have a meaning of work which they're featured. There are several types of symbols. We have metaphor, an implicit identification of a thing with another without the use of verbal indicator. For instance, saying that he is an animal. Similes are similar to metaphors. They use a verbal indicator. He eats like a pig. So if you're going to use a simile, it's going to have the words like or as. Whereas metaphor compares, but it does not use like or as. That's how you can remember. Then you have allegory, which is extended metaphor that lasts the entire of the work. You have an archetype. It's a character or plot element that occurs throughout the myth. For example, the appearance of angels is being with wings and hollows. Personification, the attribution of human characteristics is non-human entities. It's a subset of symbolism. Symbolism adds the depth to the dramatic work. It causes audiences to reflect more thoroughly upon which they have seen. Symbolism is also a powerful force for communicating meaning. Certain themes or ideas affect the mind of the audience more profoundly when presented indirectly through the symbol than when presented overtly. So now let's go ahead and let's look at Princess. Princess, come here. Princess wants me to hold it. Princess, it's okay. Remember, Princess? There's my princess. She's upset. She wants me to hold her. I'll hold you for that. We have Opedius Rex. This is the Encyclopedia Britannica online. This is a play written by Sophocles. Opedius Rex, also known as Opedius the King in Latin, or Greek Opedius Charonos, a play written by Sophocles, performed somewhere between 430 and 426 BCE. And that marks the summit of the classical Greek drama, formal achievement, known for its tight construction, mounting tension, and perfect use of dramatic devices of recognition and discovery. It examines the story of Opedius, who, in attempting to flee from his fate, rushes headlong to meet it. On the inside of the play, Opedius is a beloved ruler of the city of Thebes, whose citizens have been stricken by a plague. Consulting an Delphic oracle, Opedius is told the plague will not cease only when the murder of the Queen Josiah's first husband, King Latus, has been found and punished for his deed. Opedius resolved to find Laris' killer. His investigation turns into an obsession, reconstruction of his own hidden past when he discovers that the old man is killed when he first approached Datus as a youth. And it was none other than Latus, At the end, Joseph hangs herself in shame, and the guilt-stricken Opidius binds himself. Want a snack? No. Okay, hold on a second. Let me put my. Okay, so hold on 1 second. I'm going to show you. This is from a musical. So this is a play. So remember, it's called Opidius Rex or Opidius the King. So this is actually a play. It's Apollo production. I like the music.
Friends, what's causing these cries of anguish? Why have you come here with prayer branches and garlands? The breath of incense rises from the city with the sound of hymns and lamentation. But I'm glad you're here. Now we're face to face. That's the way it should be. There's no need for us to speak through messengers who might misinterpret our words. You there, you're a priest, are you not? Tell me what's brought you all here. Is there something you need? Is there something you fear? Tell me. And never doubt that I'll help you. What sort of a king would I be if I hadn't enough compassion to help you, my very own subjects?
Great Oedipus, and powerful king of Thebes. Yes, I'm a priest of the temple of Zeus. You see how our people are gathered here before you. Here are children and their mothers and fathers. And here are some whose backs are bent with years. Your own eyes must tell you, Thebes is tossed on a battering sea and cannot raise her head from its murderous waves. A cancer consumes the buds and fruits of the earth. Our livestock drop dead as they graze. And our women have all become barren. The few who are conceived are born dead. Deadly pestilence has taken our Thebes within its murderous grip, and all the house of Cadmus is laid waste, emptied of its people, reduced to darkness. Death alone silences our moans and cries of despair. We have not come because we believe you to be a god. But out of all the men we know, we think you are the wisest in the ways of the gods. It was you who came to us, saved us from that witch, the Sphinx, who held us captive in dreadful fear within the walls of the city and forced us to pay tribute to her for so long. Yet you possessed no better knowledge than us, nor were you better informed. It was as if some god breathed in you the wisdom necessary to set us free. Therefore, Oedipus, greatest in all men's eyes, we turn to you. Find us our safety.
All right, there you go. That's the beginning of it. I'll take you to the middle so we can see it, and then I'll do some more reading about it.
I have cursed myself.
What is it, Oedipus? It makes me tremble to look at you.
I'm not sure the blind prophet can't see, but first, tell me one thing.
You frighten me. But ask me what you want. I'll tell you.
How many men were traveling with him? He was a ruler, so he must have had many servants.
There were 5 in the group. 3 bodyguards and a servant. Laius alone was on horseback.
Now it becomes clear. Who told you he was killed by robbers?
The household servant. He was the only one to escape.
Is he still a servant of our house?
No. When you replaced Laius as king, he came to me and asked that I send him back to the fields. He didn't want to live in the city anymore. Though he was a slave, he was a good and honest man, so I granted his request and sent him away.
Can you send for him now?
I can, but why?
I've said too much already. I need to speak with this shepherd.
I will send for him, but Oedipus, please share your fears with me.
I won't hide anything from you. My mind is overcome with foreboding. But no one is more important to me than you. My father was Polybus, king of Corinth, and my mother was Merope, a Dorian. I was held among the greatest of the citizens in Corinth, but all that changed one night at a party when a drunken man accused me of being a bastard. I was furious, but I held my temper. The next day, I went to my parents and questioned them. They were deeply offended by the insult. They called the man a fool, and so I was relieved. But my suspicion remained because the story continued to be whispered. Finally, without telling my parents, I went to the shrine at Delphi. But Apollo ignored my questions and instead foretold other horrors that would befall me. He said that I was fated to lie with my mother, to breed children who would be cursed by the world, and that I was doomed to murder my father. When I heard this, I fled. And in the days that followed, I sought a place where it would be impossible for me to fulfill the dreadful prophecies predicted at the oracle. As I journeyed, I came to a place like the place where Laius met with his death. I don't want to hide the truth from you. I was near a crossroads where 3 roads met when I encountered a group of travelers, and one, like you described, on horseback. One of them on foot approached me and forced me from the road. My mind was still aggrieved with what the oracle had said. I glared at the old man, and he saw my contempt. So when he passed by me, he struck me on the head with his staff. I waited until all of them had passed by me for some time. And then I secretly attacked from the rear and killed the one trailing behind before he could utter a sound. Then a second one in the same way.
Sorry, my cat is just,
The old man,
my cat's having a hard time. Well, I guess I'm just gonna have to zoom with the cat because she's having a hard time. Sorry, guys. She's just wanting to be in my arms. Sure, you guys don't mind. Back to the reading. Sorry about that. She's having a really hard time. Okay, we're gonna go back to the reading. I just wanted to show that to you because that's what a play is like. Sorry, it's just not.
turned and saw me. I told him to.
Play is like what's going on. Okay. Hope you guys don't mind. I'm with my kitty right now. She's having a hard time. So I've been working out of the home, but every now and then I do leave. I go to my sister's house or I go shopping and she gets upset. I know she needs attention. So back to the reading. Sorry about that, but I'm sure you guys love cats, so you're okay with it. So on the outset of the play, Opidius is a beloved ruler of the city of Throbes, whose citizens have been stricken by a plague. Consulting the Delve Oracle, Opidius is just told the plague will cease only when the number murder of the queen Josada's first husband, King Laris, has been found and punished for his deed. Opidius resolved to find Lazarus' killer. His investigation turns into obsessive reconstructing his own hidden past, where he discovers that the old man he killed when he first approached Thabas as a youth was none other than Lattice. At the end, Joseph hangs himself in shame, and the guilt-stricken Opidius blinds himself. In Sophocles' later play, Opidius of Colonus, produced around 401 BCE, Opidius, the blind age Opidius, has spent many years wandering in exile. When he arrives at the sacred grove, he is guaranteed protected by Thais, the noble king of Athens. He ultimately departs to the mysterious death of Colonus, a village near Athens, where he will become a beloved source of defense to the land which has given him final refuge. The play is remarkable for its melancholy and beauty and power of its lyrical oath and the majestic characteristics of Opidius. That's Opidius. Let's go ahead and go to the end.
Self.
You can
No.
see how the play is.
Can't even look at you, poor, ruined one. If I could, I would speak.
Okay, so as you can tell, this is a tragedy. People are killing people are killing themselves, people are hurting people are hurting themselves. He wants to make himself blind. He killed people died. The beginning of the story, you heard a guy talk about the toxins that people in the land were dying and people weren't able to have children, and the children that they had died. So everybody was dying and becoming sick. They had, this is in the old days. A lot of times they'll remake something and they'll try to like change it and give it more of a modern look to it. So this is a modern one. 1986. Watch it with the students. A new translation by Don Taylor. Okay, so that's Opedius the King.
Blood from a sin the oracle blushes to whisper.
Faster than the storm, his horse must run, outstrip the wind.
Thundering Zeus' son.
Bearing children to such a great man.
God bless you too, sir, and thank you for such a courteous greeting. Have you...
A matter for his relations, not the whole city.
This is a kindness, Creo. More than I expected in my degradation. For your sake, not mine.
What favor? You need not go on your knees.
Get rid of me quickly.
He also is
Deport me
blind.
to some empty wasteland where the
So they
human voice
have
is
a thing
never
where
heard.
he becomes
Would have
blind.
done that already, of course.
And the play.
But it seemed safer as a matter of priority to consult the Oracle.
But the Oracle has spoken. Unambiguously kill the father killer. Drive out the unclean thing. I am the man.
That's true. That's what was said. But in circumstances as extraordinary as these, it seemed safer to consult the god again.
For what? I am the cause of all.
Okay, so all right, back to Opedius plays. This is from something called Spark Notes. It's similar to Cliff Notes in the sense where they explain to you, sometimes they have videos, they give you like a little cheat sheet to tell you about the plot, the summary of the characters. So, protagonist of Opedius, the king, and Opedius Colonus, it begins with the king of Thebes before the action of Opedius king begins. He's renowned in his intelligence and ability to solve riddles. He names the literal meaning of swollen foot to clue his identity. He was taken from the house of Lettuce as a baby and left in the mountain with his feet bound together. In this way, Thebes, he is killed by his biological father, not knowing who he was, and proceeded to marry Justica, his biological mother. So there's some more tragedy and drama there, marrying your mother. People might consider that, incest. Sorry, all this speaking, I need to get a little bit of water. Oh, it says shine. The other side says wildflower, in case you're wondering what it says. Back to the reading, we have Joseca, Opedius' wife and mother. Creon's sister, Joseca, appears only in the final scenes of Opedius King. In her first words, she attempts to make peace between Opedius and Creon, pleading with Opedius not to banish Creon. She's comforting her husband and calmly tries to urge him to reject Thais' terrifying prophecies as false. Joseca solves the riddle of Opedius' identity before Opedius does, and she presses her love for her son and husband and her desire to protect him from the knowledge. The child of Opedius and Joseca, therefore, both Opedius' daughter and sister. Agatine appears briefly at the end of Opedius the King when she says goodbye to her father as Creon prepares to banish Opedius. She appears in greater length of Opedius Colonus, leading and caring for her old blind man in exile. But Agatine comes down her own in Agatine. After that play's protagonist, she demonstrates courage and clarity of sight unparalleled by any other character in the three Thavian plays, whereas her characters, Opedius, Creon, Polynice, are reluctant to acknowledge the consequences of their actions. Agatine is unbanished in her conviction that she has done right. Creon. Opedius' brother-in-law Creon appears more than any characters in the three plays. Combined in him more than anyone else, she sees gradual rise and fall of the man's power. Although Opedius king, Creon claims to have no desire in the kingship. Yet when he has opportunity to gasp power at the end of the play, Creon seems quite eager. We learn in Opedius at Colonus that we're willing to fight with it. Nephews in the power. In Agatine, Creon rules Thebes with stubborn blindness that's similar to Opedius' rule. But Creon never has her sympathy in the way Opedius does because he's bossy and bureaucratic, intent on asserting his own authority. Son of Opedius and thus own brother, Polynices appears very briefly in Opedius at Colonus. He arrives at Colonus seeking his father's blessing in his battle with his brother, or even the power of Thebes. Polynices tries to point out similarity between his own situation and that of Opidius. And his words seem opportunistic rather than vital, a fact that Opidius points out. Thais, the blind soothsayer of Thebes, appears in both Opidius the king and Antine. In Opidius the king, Trelesis tells Opidius that he's the murderer that he hunts, and Opidius does not believe him. In Antigone, Trelesis tells Creon that Creon himself is bringing disaster to Thebes, and Creon doesn't believe him. Yet both Opidius and Creon claim to trust Thebes deeply. The literal blindness of the soothsayers point at the metaphorical blindness of those who refuse to believe in the truth about themselves when they hear it spoken. Creon's son, who appears in only Agatine, Harmon is engaged to marry Agatine. Motivated by her love for her, he argues that Creon in the later decision to punish her. Esmene, Opidius' daughter, Esmene appears at the end of Opidius the king and is limited extent at Opidius Colonus and Agatine. Ishmael's minor part of the underscore her sister's grandeur and courage. Esmene fears helping Agatine bury Polynices, but offers to die beside Agatine when Creon sentences her to die. Agatine, however, refuses to allow her sister to be martyred for something that she did not have the courage to stand up for. Thasus, the king of Athens, and Opidius at Colonus is renowned and powerful warrior. Thais takes pity on Opidius and defends him against Creon. Thais is the only one who knows to spot which Opidius descended in the underworld. A secret he promises Opidius he will hold forever. Chorus. Sometimes comically obtuse or fickle, sometimes perspective, sometimes melodramatic, the chorus reacts to the events on stage. Chorus reaction can be lessons in how the audience should interpret when seen, or how it should appear interpret when it's seen. So who is actually Opidius? Well, Opidius is a man of swift action and great insight. At the opening of Opidius the King, which we saw in the play version, the old one, and then we saw a modern version where they adapted it to more modern days, the early 1900s, but still with the same theme of him marrying his mother and having his mother's baby, and also him becoming blind. When the citizens of Thebes beg him to do something about the plague, for instance, Opidius is one step ahead of them. He already sent Creon to the oracle of Delphi for advice. Later, we see that Opidius' habit of acting swiftly is dangerously side. When he tells the story of the killing of the band travelers who attempted to shove him the three-way crossroads, Opidius shows that he has captivity to behave rashly. At the beginning of Opidius the King, Opidius is hugely confident with good reason. He has saved Thebes from the curse of the Sphinx and become a king virtually overnight. He proclaims his name proudly, though he himself is claiming, "Here I am myself, you know me, and the world knows me, and my fame, I'm Opidius." By the end of the tragedy, however, Opidius' name became a curse. As you know, Opidius Cronus, the leader of the Cronus, terrified even to hear it cry. Opidius' swiftness and confidence continued to end with Opidius the King. We see him integrate Creon, call for Tereus, threaten to banish Tereus and Creon, call for the servant who escaped the attack of Larius, call for the shepherd who brought him to Corinth, rush to the palace to stab his own eyes and then demand to be exiled, and he constantly in motion, seemingly trying to keep pace with his fate, even though he goes well beyond his reach. In Opidius at Colonus, however, Opidius seems to have begun to accept that much of his life is out of control. He spends most of his time sitting rather than acting. Most picket lines are 825 to 960, when Opidius grovells blindly and helplessly as Crip takes his children from him. In order to get them back, Opidius must rely wholly on Thais. Once he's given his trust to Thais, Opidius seems to be ready to find peace. At Colonus, he has last to be forged, found a kind of home after many years of exile. A single most significant action of Opidius at Colonus is Opidius' deliberate move off stage to die. The final scene of the play has haste and drive at the beginning of Opidius the King. But this haste for Oedipus at last is toward peace rather than war. All right, so this is an explanation of, of who was Oedipus Rex. This is from Crash Course, and this is on the literature.
Hey, did you guys know TireRack.com has brand new waiting rooms? And check out the view to the service bay.
Hi, I'm John Green. Welcome to Crash Course Literature. Today we're going to talk about Oedipus. Leo Tolstoy once famously wrote that all happy families are alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And I certainly hope that there's no family as unhappy as Oedipus's. Ancient Greek playwrights really specialized in the dysfunctional family. I mean, they have plays about wives killing husbands, parents killing children, children killing parents, siblings killing each other, and they also wrote tragedies. But it's hard to imagine a more tragic, dysfunctional family than the Theban clan that Sophocles writes about in Oedipus the King. I mean, except for the Kardashians. Mr. Green, who are the Kardashians? That sounds exotic. Is it something from Star Wars? Oh yeah, me from the past. You don't know about the Kardashians. Right now, to you, the only Kardashian you know is O.J. Simpson's defense attorney. Anyway, don't worry about it. Just imagine a green light on the other side of the bay that represents the glory you'll never reach. That's the Kardashians. Okay, so Oedipus is king of Thebes, having solved the riddle of the Sphinx and saved the city from destruction, but now a plague is devastating Thebes, and various oracles and bird entrails suggest it's because the murderer of the old king, Laius, still lives there unpunished. Oedipus decides to investigate the murder, only to discover that, mind blown, he is the one who killed Laius and married his queen, Jocasta. Then he finds out that Laius was actually his father, and Jocasta is his mother, so he's had 4 children with his mom, fulfilling an earlier prophecy because bird entrails are never wrong. It's the old accidentally kill your father, accidentally marry your mother plot. It goes way back. Freud can tell you a lot about it at Crash Course Psychology. Anyway, Jocasta hangs herself and Oedipus gouges out his own eyes with her jewelry, then goes into exile. In subsequent plays, his 2 sons murder each other and one of his daughters commits suicide. So, you know, it could have gone better. So for a little context, theater was a really big deal to the Greeks. I mean, if you were a male citizen, not a woman, not a slave, attending it was your civic duty. It was sort of like voting, except that it began with ritual animal sacrifice, so it was really nothing like voting. But this civic duty aspect is interesting because a lot of the plays ask really troubling questions about power and control and the wisdom of rulers. Like, playwrights masked their commentary by setting plays in earlier mythic eras or in foreign lands, just like Shakespeare did. But they were quite provocative then, and what's most important is that the best of them are still interesting now. 3 playwrights would each present 4 plays, a cycle of 3 related tragedies, and then a satyr play, which would be funny and often involved enormous phalluses and or poop jokes. Citizens would watch play after play while judges would determine a winner, so it was kind of like Sundance or Cannes, but again with the ritual animal sacrifice, and there was no multi-million-dollar theatrical distribution deals. You know, but there was glory. Unfortunately, we only have a small portion of these plays today. Many were lost over the millennia, including some that were destroyed at the burning of the Library of Alexandria. In Sophocles' day, the cast was made of 3 male actors, some of whom took on multiple roles, and also a chorus. Playwrights were typically the director, the composer, the set designer, and often also the lead actor, although apparently Sophocles did not appear in his plays because he was, I guess, a terrible actor. But the choruses were drawn from the Athenian citizenry and generally served as like stand-ins for the audience, asserting conventional wisdom and asking the questions that a typical audience member might. The actors wore masks that were made of linen and hair, as well as enormous robes and platform sandals, so you could still see them even if you were in the cheap seats. So Sophocles lived throughout nearly all of the 5th century BCE, and he wrote 123 plays. We have 7. Who knows what kind of crazy stuff people got up to in the other ones. The first person to offer literary criticism of Greek drama was my old nemesis Aristotle, whom you'll remember was wrong about everything. This was a guy who believed that people were naturally born to slavery, except that he was actually kind of right about a lot of theater stuff. It pains me to say this because I do genuinely despise him, but Aristotle had a lot of interesting ideas about story. For instance, he noticed that in a lot of stories, the main character has a recognition and a reversal. He's also responsible for a lot of classical ideas about tragedy and comedy, and Oedipus fits his definition of tragedy very well, probably because it was his favorite play. Aristotle defines tragedy as, quote, an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude. Tragedy is also meant to evoke both pity and fear. I mean, when Oedipus returns at the play's end wearing a new mask that shows his gouged out eyes, you feel bad for him. You also feel afraid. But here's the tricky part. Aristotle wrote that tragedy should afflict a mostly good character who makes a big mistake. I mean, it can't be about a bad character because then you don't feel any pity. And it can't be about a perfect character who does everything right and still suffers a tragic end because, one, that wouldn't be very satisfying, and two, it would imply that the universe doesn't reward goodness and punish evil, which is kind of a terrifying thought. So instead, it has to be about a good guy afflicted with a hamartia or a hamartia, depending on how pretentious you are. This word is sometimes mistranslated, including by the protagonist of my novel The Fault in Our Stars, available in bookstores everywhere, as a tragic flaw, but actually it's a term from archery that means you aim for the bullseye, but you miss. Now, I would argue that in the 2,500 years since Oedipus, there have been some very good tragedies that evoke fear and pity without the argument that the universe is interested in the lives of individuals, but you know, this is the classical definition. So could Oedipus really, my desk disappeared, that means it's time for the open letter. Hey there, Chewbacca. An open letter to the tragic hero, a type of character, of course, exemplified by Chewbacca. He was a Wookiee. He was strong, he was loyal, he was a great man, or at least a great Wookiee. But it was his loyalty, a desirable trait, that also ultimately made him, you know, kind of a complicated hero. I mean, Chewbacca made a blood oath to Han Solo, so if you mess with Han Solo, Chewbacca's gonna rip your arms off. And for those of you who know the Star Wars universe outside the movies, you already know that eventually that does prove tragic. Chewbacca, you're a hero, but it's your heroism that also was ultimately your undoing. Best wishes, John Green. So is Oedipus a good character, and does he make a great mistake? Well, let's go to the thought bubble. So at the beginning of the play, Oedipus definitely seems like an A++ king. I mean, the priest calls him the first of men in all the chances of this life. When the priest comes to tell him about the suffering in the city, Oedipus says he knows about it already. I have known the story before you told it. Oedipus is already worried about what's happening to his people. In fact, he's dispatched his brother-in-law Creon to visit an oracle and find out the source of the pestilence. And let's not forget that Oedipus has already saved the city once by answering the riddle of the Sphinx. The Sphinx had the body of a woman, the wings of an eagle, and a really bad temper. She had a habit of killing everyone who answered her riddle incorrectly. So, I mean, you know, it takes a measure of courage to try to answer the riddle. He's a good guy, he's a great king, right? I mean, when Creon gives answers that Oedipus doesn't like, Oedipus accuses him of plotting against him. He also has some harsh words for the blind seer Tiresias when Tiresias correctly names Oedipus as the source of the contagion. When the shepherd is brought to Oedipus and resists revealing the truth of Oedipus's birth because he knows it will upset the king, Oedipus threatens the man with torture. Then there's the ambiguity of missing the mark. I mean, what was Oedipus's error in this play? Was it killing Laius at the crossroads? I mean, that's maybe a little bit aggressive, but Sophocles makes it pretty clear that Laius had some chariot-era road rage and Oedipus was acting in self-defense. Was it sleeping with Jocasta? Well, that's pretty icky, but again, not really a choice. She was presented to him along with the kingdom when he defeated the Sphinx, and as we've said, he treats other characters pretty shabbily, but those are small mistakes rather than great ones. Maybe his mistake is believing he can outrun or escape his own fate, but if you were told you were going to murder your father and marry your mother, wouldn't you try to escape it? Now maybe you're thinking, well, if I heard a prophecy that I was going to be a father killer and a mother, I would, you know, avoid fights with older men and sex with older women. And fair enough, but remember, Laius and Jocasta had attempted to kill Oedipus. They received a prophecy about this too. So Oedipus was brought up by the king and queen of Corinth, who he assumed were his parents. How is it a mistake to stay very far away from your parents and in the process save the city of Thebes? And if you can't outrun your fate, how is your fate a result of your flaws? So the play depends a lot on ironies. The guy who seems the smartest is actually the most most ignorant. The man who saved Thebes is actually the one destroying it. Enlightenment leads to literal blindness. But that, combined with the aforementioned ambiguity, is a lot of what's made the play so enjoyable to so many generations of people. We in the audience are aware of all these ironies in a way that no one on stage is, at least until the very end. Remember how Oedipus says, "I have known the story before you told it"? Well, just about everyone in the audience also knows the story before it's told. I mean, you probably knew the outlines of this story before you actually read the play, right? The gap between what we know in the audience and what the characters know on stage makes us uncomfortable and scared for them, and it ratchets up the tension. Oedipus is a detective story where it turns out the detective is the murderer, and the detective doesn't know it, but the reader does. So with each new scene, with each new clue, the net draws more and more tightly around Oedipus. Every time a messenger comes with supposedly good news, hey, the king of Corinth is dead. Hey, the king of Corinth wasn't your father. Oedipus is led closer to the truth of his own guilt. And at several points, Jocasta tries to persuade Oedipus not to inquire further, but Oedipus can't help himself. He wants to know the whole story. For me, at least, that's what's admirable about him, and also what's pitiable. The play asks whether knowing is a good thing. I mean, Tiresias says, "Alas, how terrible is wisdom when it brings no profit to the man that's wise." And Oedipus, at least personally, probably would have been happier living in ignorance, although then the plague would have continued to devastate Thebes. So I think the play ultimately suggests that even though ignorance can be bliss, Oedipus's search for truth is right and just and brave and uncompromising, and that's what makes him great. It's also what ruins his life. As the critic E.R. Dodds says, what causes his ruin is his strength and courage, his loyalty to Thebes, and his loyalty to the truth. And so finally, thankfully, I do find myself disagreeing with Aristotle, because I don't think that Oedipus was a great man ruined by a great error. I think the story is more complicated than that. So could Oedipus ever really have escaped his fate? Probably not. I mean, there are occasional examples in Greek myth of gods softening a fate or finding a loophole, but those are rare. So when you read Oedipus, you realize there are actually two stories. One is about what's already happened, and one is about what's happening now. It's the second one that interests Sophocles, like killing the father and marrying the mother. That stuff happens in the past, off stage. Sophocles concentrates on the choices that Oedipus freely makes to find the source of the plague even when it means implicating himself, to gouge out his eyes so that he won't have to look at his parents in the underworld. So Oedipus can't escape his fate, but he does have a measure of free will. He does make some choices. What's interesting to Sophocles isn't so much the fulfillment of the prophecy as how it is fulfilled and how that affects the present. As the critic A.W. Gomes put it, the gods know what the final score of the football game will be, but we still have to play it. Ultimately, the victory, Gomes says, will depend on the skill, the determination, the fitness of the players, and a little on luck. Instead of using the play to stage some sort of fate versus free will debate, Sophocles is interested in asking questions of both fate and free will. I mean, when we see Oedipus, we should ask ourselves, how much control do we have over our lives? How much do we owe to genetics, to privilege, to upbringing, to accident, to the choices that we do or don't make? And those are relevant questions today. Now, of course, not everyone thought that was the most interesting part of the play. Like Sigmund Freud decided that the reason the play was so successful is because everyone suffers from a so-called Oedipus complex. Freud described this in the interpretation of dreams as the fate to direct our first sexual impulse toward our mother and our first hatred and our first murderous wish against our father. But for the record, Oedipus does not have an Oedipus complex. His tragedy is about a man who deliberately tries to avoid killing his father and impregnating his mother, not about a man who secretly wants to. But ultimately, what makes Oedipus such a great play is that it stands up to many readings and can inform our lives in many ways. I mean, is he a great man? Does he make a great mistake? Does he suffer his fate because of personal flaws or because of the nature of the universe? Those are big, interesting questions, and it's nice to know that people have been asking them for millennia. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Crash Course is made with the help of all of these nice people, and it exists thanks to the support of our subscribers over at Subbable. This particular episode of Crash Course was brought to you by co-sponsors Jim Urajo and Matt Ely, so we want to thank them and all of our subscribers at Subbable. You can find great perks by clicking that link right there. There's also a link in the video info below. Thank you for watching, and as we say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome.
Okay, so there you go. That's a little bit of the background. Hey.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course.
Okay, so you have some insight. I like his explanation because he explains it in a way that everybody can understand. That was on Spark Notes. Hold on, I'm trying to show you Cliff Notes. Oh, here it is. Right, here we go. This is a play summary of Oedipius the King. Oedipius the King unfolds as a murder mystery, a political thriller, and a psychological whodunit. Through this mythical history of the parricide and incest, Sophocles emphasized the irony of a man determined to track down and impose impose and punish an assassin who turns out to be himself. As the character opens and dozens of Thebes beg their king, Oedipius, to lift a plague to threaten to destroy the city. Oedipius has already sent his brother-in-law Creon to the oracle to learn what to do. In his return, Creon announces that oracle instructs him to find a murderer of Laius, the king who ruled Thebes before Oedipius. The discovery and punishment of the murder will end in plague. At once, Oedipius sets about to solve the murder. Now, this is Cliff Notes. It's similar to Spark Notes, but it's a little bit different. It's a different company. There is hints darkly of incestuous marriage and the future of blindness, infirmity, and wandering. Oedipius attempts to gain advice from Josana, the queen, and encourages him to ignore prophecies, explaining that a prophet once told her that Letus, her husband, would die at the hands of her son. According to Josaka, the prophecy did not come true because the baby died abandoned and Laurus himself was killed by a band of robbers at the crossroads. Oedipius becomes distressed by Josaka's remarks because just because it came to be, Thebes, he killed a man who resembled Laurus at the crossroads. To learn the truth, Oedipius sends for the only living witness, the murderer, a shepherd. Another worry haunts Oedipius. As a young man, he learned from Oracle that he was fated by his kill of his father and marry his mother. The fear of the prophecy drove him to his home in Corinth and brought him ultimately to Thebes. Again, Josaka advises him not to worry about prophecies. Oedipius finds out from the messenger that Polybus, a king of Corinth, Oedipius' father, has died of old age. Josaka rejoices purely as a proof of the prophecy. Oedipius' hurt is worthless. Still, Oedipius worries about fulfilling the prophecy with his mother. Maricopa concerned of Josaka's miseries. Overhearing the messenger offering what he believes to be cheering news, Polybus and Myrta are not Oedipius' real parents. In fact, the messenger himself gave Oedipius a royal couple when the shepherd offered him an abandonment baby from the house of Laurus. Oedipius becomes determined to track down the shepherd and learn the truth of the birth. Suddenly terrified, Josaka begs him to stop, and he runs off the palace, wild with grief, confident that the worst can hear the tale of his lowly birth. Oedipius eagerly awaits the shepherd. At first, the shepherd refuses to speak, but under the threat of the death, he tells what to do, and he knows Oedipius is actually the son of Laurus and Josaka. And so, despite his precautions, the prophecy that Oedipius dreaded has actually come true. Realizing that he killed his father and married his mother, Oedipius agonized with his fate. Rushing to the palace, Opedia finds the queen has killed herself, tortured, frenzied. Opedia takes pins from her gown and rakes out his own eyes. So he poked out his own eyes, so he can no longer look upon misery as caused. He blinded in disgrace, Opedia begs Creon to kill him, but as the plague concludes, he quietly submits to Creon's leadership and humbly awaits the oracle to determine which he will slay him out after. So we can see how this is tragedy. And instead of taking care of the situation, he himself just makes it worse by poking out his own eyeballs. All right. All right, so that was Opedius the king. Here's just a funny one. This is Thug Notes. This just makes fun of it. It's not real. I mean, because it's a serious tragedy and it's a little bit horrific, so I'm giving you a heads up.
It can help you write quickly and confidently, so you never have to slow down at work.
Funny, so it's not
Instant corrections make your writing mistake-free.
Happy Valentine's Day, thugs! Today we searching for some motherfucking truth with Oedipus the King by Sophocles. Man, it is raining on the kingdom of Thebes. A plague been killing homies by the stack, and now everybody asking King Oedipus what he gonna do about it. When word comes from the oracle of Apollo, Oedipus finds out that the murderer of the old King Laius is in town. And if he want to save his people from the plague, that fool has got to go. When the blind prophet Tiresias swings into Thebes, Oedipus asks this fool who this mystery killer be. Since Mr. T pities that fool, he ain't want to tell him the cold truth. Oedipus be like, man, cut that bullshit and start talking, fool. So Tiresias oblige a brother and say that Oedipus smoked the old king. Oedipus all like, what you say? Tired of getting called out, that blind prophet starts running his mouth. Yo, Oedipus, stop fronting. You don't even know who your parents are. And when you do find the truth, it's gonna be lights out, playboy. Then Oedipus's honey Jocasta tell him not to pay that hater no mind. First off, Laius was killed by a crew of gangbangers. And second, some prophecies don't mean shit. Laius was supposed to be murked by his own son. So he and Jocasta tossed that baby. It's all good now, right? But after Jocasta describes where Laius got shanked, Eddie be like, oh shit, now that you mention it, maybe I did kill this fool. My bad. Back in the day, Oedipus cruised over to Apollo's oracle and heard that he was gonna murk his own daddy and pork his mama. So our boy flips shit and bounces out of Corinth, never to return. On the way to Thebes, he wrecked some haters because they got all up in his grill. Turns out, one of those haters was Laius. Then Oedipus gets the word from a messenger that Corinth wasn't actually his original hood. Nah, baby Ed was found chilling near a mountain, and according to some nappy-ass shepherd, Laius' son was dropped off at the same spot. Oh shit, that means Oedipus been boning his mama. His mama! Ugh! And his kids are his brothers and sisters? Oh man, that's nasty, man. Disgusting. So they do the only logical thing. Jocasta kills herself, and Oedipus stabs his eyes out with gold pins. Then Oedipus throws up the deuce to all of Thebes and spends the rest of his days wandering the earth. This right.
Okay, so that's his explanation of who Oedipus the King was and the storyline behind it. So you can see how different people take different approaches. We saw Spark Notes. I read that to you. I also read to you Cliff Notes and Encyclopedia Britannica. We watched different plays, a play with the old days, a play with modern days. So Let me show you another play. There's a couple different versions of the plays. I like to show you so you see a variety of how people have interpreted and translated. We saw this one, this Apollo Arts. Here's another one. This one is a classics and ancient arts. This is the Warbeck Classical Department and Classic Society. This is in the Drama Festival in 2020. So this was actually a year ago, before COVID, of course. So here's another translation.
Priests as well, for I'm priestess of Zeus. And these ones here the pick of all our youth. The other groups sit in the marketplace with suppliant branches, or else in front of palaces' two shrines, where Issemnus prophesizes with fire.
Our city, as you yourself can see, is badly shaken. She cannot raise her head above the depth of so much surging death. Disease infects the fruit blossoms in our land. Disease infects our herds of grazing cattle, makes women in labor lose their children, and deadly pestilence, that fiery god, swoops down to blast the city, emptying the house of Cadmus and filling black Hades with groans and howls.
These children and myself all sit here by your home, not because we think you're equal to the gods. No, we judge you, the first of men, in what happens in this life and in our interactions with the gods. For you came here to our Cadmean city and freed us from the tribute we were paying to that cruel singer. In their stories, the people testify how with the gods' help you gave us back our lives. So now, Oedipus, greatest king in all men's eyes, we're here as suppliants, all begging you to find some help for us, either by listening to a heavenly voice or by learning from another human being. For in my view, men of experience provide advice that gives the best results. So now, you best of men, act to consolidate your fame. For thanks to your eagerness in earlier days, the city celebrates you as its savior. Be that same man today. If you are to rule as you are doing now, it is better to be king in a land of men than in a desert. An empty ship or a city wall is nothing if no men share a life together there.
My poor children, I know why you have come. I am not ignorant of what you yearn for I understand that you are ill, and yet, sick as you are, there is not one of you whose illness equals mine. For your agony comes to each one of you as his alone, a special pain for him and no one else. But the soul inside me sorrows for myself, and for the city, and for you all together. You are not rousing me from a deep sleep. You must know that I have been shedding many tears and in my wandering thoughts exploring many pathways. After a careful search, I grasped the only help that I could find and acted on it. So I've sent away my brother-in-law, son of Monosius, Creon, to Pythian Apollo's shrine to learn from him what I might do or say to save our city. But when I count the days, the time he's been gone, I now wonder what he's doing. For he's been gone too long, well past the time he should have taken. But when he returns, I'd be a wicked man if I do not act on all that God reveals.
What you have said is most appropriate.
My lord, Creon approaches.
Lord Apollo, as he returns, may fine shining fortune, bright as his countenance, attend on him.
Let us hope the news he brings is good.
My royal kinsman, child of Monosius, what message do you bring us from the god?
Good news, I tell you. If things turn out well, then our current troubles, so difficult to bear, will end up bringing us great benefits.
And what is the oracle? So far your words inspire in me no confidence or fear.
If you wish to hear the news in public, I'm prepared to speak, or we could step inside.
Speak out to everyone. The grief I feel for these citizens is even greater than any pain I feel for my own life.
Then let me report what I heard from the god. Lord Phoebus clearly orders us to drive away the polluting stain this land has harbored. It will not be healed if we keep nursing it.
What sort of cleansing? And this disaster, how did it happen?
By banishment. Or atone for murder by shedding blood again. For blood brings on the storm which blasts our state.
The one whose fate the god revealed, what sort of a man is he?
Before you came, my lord, to steer our ship of state, Laius.
Okay, so this is actually their version. Made it modern day clothes, young people in it. Here's the middle.
Ask the prophet if I brought back to you exactly what was said. At that point,
Okay, so they have more of a modern look. Young people playing it.
If I have to ask again, then you will die.
Okay, so there's his little violin as well. Oh, they also poked out. He also poked out his own eyes in this one too.
If there was some fate more serious than all the rest.
So I guess that's the theme in all of these plays, to poke out your eyes. Here's another one. This one's famous because of all the costumes. This one, they like to wear costumes to make it kind of exciting. This is 1957, so this is old. It's actually 3 hours and 37 minutes long, but we're just going to watch the beginning and I'll click it in the middle of it so you can see the costumes.
Behind those doors, a company is getting ready to act the tragedy of King Oedipus. It was written more than 2,000 years ago. Sophocles, an Athenian poet, wrote it for the great spring festival in honor of the god of spring. The events that you will see are not really taking place. They are just the reenactments of a sacrifice, a human sacrifice. In the Christian ritual, a priest, by the breaking of bread and the pouring of wine, symbolically reenacts the breaking of Christ's body and the shedding of his blood. In narrative and mime, he commemorates the sacrifice of one man who died for the people. We, too, shall commemorate such a sacrifice, the destruction of one man that his people might live. As priests put on vestments and move in a preordained ritual, we put on these characters and reenact this tragedy. The god of whom we shall speak and to whom we shall pray is called Apollo. He represents one aspect of omnipotence. He is the sun god, giver of light and giver of spiritual light. Our tragedy is largely concerned with the contrast of darkness and light. The darkness of blindness and the light of the eyes, the darkness of ignorance and the lightness of knowledge, the darkness of matter, the lightness of spirit, imagination. In fact, this place is a stage. Around us are cameras, great lamps, the machinery of making films. But now, imagine. These great lamps are the sun. The cameras are watching eyes. This stage is part of the ancient city of Thebes. Here, on this rock, stands the palace of the king.
King Oedipus!
Around us and below is the city. Plague rages. The citizens approach. They carry branches hung with wool, traditional symbols of prayer.
We are waiting for Oedipus. Oedipus, king of Thebes.
His queen is Jocasta.
But Jocasta was once the wife of another king.
Another king of Thebes.
His name? Laius. Laius.
Where is Laius?
Disappeared.
Went on a long journey.
Never returned.
Laius never returned.
That was long ago.
Then came the Sphinx.
Sphinx!
What was the Sphinx? A monster, half woman, half bird.
She ravished the city.
Devoured our children. Thebes was in despair.
Despair.
Then came a stranger.
A young man from far away. Conquered the Sphinx. Delivered our city.
In despair, the Sphinx cast herself down from this rock.
Cast herself from the rock. Oedipus was our savior.
We made him our king. Jocasta, wife to dead Laius, became his queen.
Jocasta, queen of thieves. Oedipus conquered. Oedipus savior. Oedipus. Oedipus king.
What do you think about the costumes? Okay, so see how this one has a lot of nonverbal. All right, so there you have it. That one's all costumes. Here's another one. This is from 2015, about 5 years ago. So you can see how they do different translations and performances. This is theirs. This is Grand Junction High School. So high schools put on this, small community theaters, colleges put on performances, movies.
My children, the new blood of ancient Thebes. Why are you here? Huddling at my altar, praying before me, your branches round and broad. Our city reeks with the smoke of burning incense, and rings with cries for the healer, and wailing for the dead. I thought it wrong, my children. You hear the news from others' messengers. So here I am myself before you. You all know me. The whole world knows my fame. I am Oedipus. Speak up, old woman. Your years, your dignity, you should speak for the others. Why here and kneeling? Will praise upon you so. Some strong fear, some sudden doubt. You can trust me, I am ready to help. I'll do anything in my power. I'll be blind to misery, not to pity the people kneeling at my feet.
All right, so there we have it. That's the high school. That's the high school.
Hello.
So that's the thing. Poke out your eyes in every single one of these translations and interpretations. So they pretty much start off the same and end the same. And this is the story of Epeidius.
This is the checkers game where grandson and granddad will bond. This is the kitchen.
In one of the most prestigious kingdoms of Greece, a boy was born, the son of the king with his young and beautiful queen. However, the birth of the heir to the royal house was not something auspicious at all. In his visit to Apollo's temple, the king was told a prophecy in which the birth of his son would be the cause of his death and the ruin of his entire family. The king, convinced that something had to be done, persuaded the queen that, for the good of all, the child's life would have to meet its end. The baby is delivered to a servant of the king, who would have to take the infant to Mount Cithaeron. The boy had his feet pierced, and a rope passed through them. The boy had to be hung on a tree by his feet, allowing the beasts to do whatever they wanted with him. However, the servant could not leave the poor child in that place, and handed him to an unknown shepherd who was passing by with his cattle. The shepherd untied the child's feet and treated his wounds. He baptized the baby as Oedipus, which meant the one with swollen feet. The shepherd, in turn, was extremely poor, and since he did not have conditions to raise the child, decided he took him to the king of Corinth. Polybus and his wife had no children, and therefore decided to adopt Oedipus as their own son. Oedipus grew, and he was beautiful, strong, and deeply astute, and he lived happily as the crown prince of Corinth. However, during a celebration, one of the noblemen insulted Oedipus, saying that he was not worthy to be the heir to the throne of Corinth, since he was a foreigner. Oedipus questioned King Polybus, wanting to know the truth, but the latter told him not to mind the words of a drunk. Oedipus, unhappy with the king's response, decided to find the truth in the Oracle of Delphi. Despite the insistence, the oracle refused to answer his questions, but prophesied a terrible future for the young boy.
You shall kill your own father, marry your mother, and leave a shameful descent.
Oedipus was dismayed by such a dreadful prophecy, and decided to leave Corinth to avoid killing his beloved father and taking his mother as a wife. The young man, disheartened, wandered through the roads of Greece until, at a crossroads, he met a gentleman in a wagon, accompanied by his servants. The road was narrow, and one of the servants threw Oedipus off the road to allow the passage of his lord's cart. The young prince, outraged, hit the servant with his cane. The lord and his servants grabbed their weapons and advanced against Oedipus. Oedipus was surrounded by aggressors, but his strength, agility, and youth allowed the youngster to defeat all his opponents. The lord and his servants were dead. Only one of the servants managed to escape. Oedipus, victorious, felt a strong sense of power after winning a battle against several opponents. The Prince of Corinth continued to wander through Greece when he was faced with the news that a terrible monster was terrorizing the region of the kingdom of Thebes. Oedipus, feeling empowered after his recent victory, went to Thebes to confront the fearsome Sphinx and add his name to the pantheon of heroes.
Right.
Oedipus,
So this is more on Oedipus and the Greek mythology.
Prince of Corinth, had abandoned his kingdom.
Now with Taco Bell's app, you can build your own $5 cravings box. Because you know what you crave at Taco Bell.
So mad about Taco Bell.
So eat like you.
After hearing from the Oracle of Delphi the prophecy in which he would be responsible for the death of his father, while also marrying his mother. In the name of the love for his parents, he left Corinth and began to wander aimlessly through Greece. In his wanderings, Oedipus heard rumors that a monster was devastating the city of Thebes. The creature was known by the name of Sphinx. It was a winged monster, a mixture of a woman with a lion. The vile creature stood on a rock near the city entrance, and all those who approached her heard the following sentence uttered by the Sphinx.
Decipher me or I'll devour you.
And immediately after that, the creature presented a riddle to those who dared to approach her. All those who tried to decipher the enigma failed and were devoured. Creon provisionally reigned over Thebes, which was mourning the death of King Laius. After losing his firstborn to the Sphinx, Creon decreed that he would grant the hand of his sister Jocasta in marriage, queen and the widow of Laius, to the one capable of defeating the Sphinx, and this hero would become king of Thebes. Oedipus decided to accept this challenge because he did not fear death, and if he ended up dying, at least he would know that his parents would be safe from his terrible prophecy. Oedipus met the Sphinx and heard the well-known sentence.
Decipher me or I'll devour you. In the morning, I have 4 legs. At noon, 2. And when the twilight comes, I have 3. Among all creatures, it is the only that can change its number of legs, but the greater the number, the lower its speed and strength.
Oedipus stared at the Sphinx, which was already licking her lips, waiting for yet another meal. And so the boy uttered his reply. The answer is the human being. At the dawn of his life, he crawls on his arms and legs. In the middle of his life, he walks on his 2 legs. At the end of his life, he has to rely on a cane. The enigma's resolution covered the Sphinx with an unbearable shame, and she ended up throwing herself from the top of a cliff. The Sphinx was dead, and Thebes was safe again. Creon, as promised, gave the hand of his sister Jocasta to the hero, and he married her. Oedipus was now the king of Thebes. His wife, despite having a certain age, was still very beautiful and fertile. And with her, Oedipus had several children, and they lived very happily. But black clouds began to cover the city of Thebes, a premonition that something terrible was about to happen. After defeating the terrible Sphinx, Oedipus, as a reward, received the hand of the queen Jocasta of Thebes in marriage and became king of Thebes. He had 4 children with the queen, the boys Eteocles and Polynices, and the girls Antigone and Ismene. Many years passed, and Oedipus, despite having some flaws, was seen as a righteous and benevolent king. However, a plague was ravaging the city of Thebes, and many lives were cut short by the disease. Desperate, the population reached for their king, who had already saved the city in the past, and begged Oedipus to save it again. King Oedipus did not dodge his responsibility with the city and ordered Creon, his friend and brother-in-law, to go to the Oracle of Delphi and find out the source of such misfortune. Creon returns from the oracle with the answers for such calamity.
I will reveal what I was told by Apollo. Through the glorious oracle of Delphi, he expressly ordered that we must purify the land of the sacred city of Thebes, which is tarnished, thanks to a vile criminal.
The oracle revealed that the plague would persist until the one responsible for the death of Laius, the former king of Thebes, was expelled from the glorious city of Thebes, which he used as a haven. The only thing known was that King Laius had been murdered by a gang of thieves at a crossroads, but their identities remained unknown. Oedipus assumed the responsibility to uncover the identity of such vile element, who lurked within the walls of Thebes, and said, "Anyone who knows the real identity of the murderer is obliged to report what they know to me. Do not fear any kind of retaliation, regardless of who the perpetrator is, since you will be duly rewarded. I want the murderer to know that if he decides to willingly surrender himself, his physical integrity will be preserved, and he will not suffer any sentence, except the exile required by the oracle. And I want everyone to know that I will not rest until the man responsible for Laius's death is found and expelled from this city, even if he is part of my court or family. And I pray that the gods punish such an individual, inflicting him with full-fledged pain and suffering." Creon suggested the presence of Tiresias. The old blind man was a notorious clairvoyant, and, with the help of his powers, the criminal could be found. The old Tiresias appeared before Oedipus, who told him, "Wise elder, your reputation as a clairvoyant gives you enough credit to help us discover the identity of the actual murderer of my predecessor. Therefore, I command you to reveal everything you know."
Terrible is the knowledge that only brings misery to those who know it. Let me go, my king, and bear your own burden, and let me bear mine. It would be better for both of us.
If you have knowledge of the killer's identity, reveal it now. Do not allow the city of Thebes to continue to suffer due to your omission.
You don't know what you are asking for. Such knowledge will only cast misery, and my mouth knows nothing.
How dare you betray the soil that welcomed you? This traitor can only be complicit in such a crime. Tiresias was deeply offended by this accusation and decided to reveal what he knew.
You insisted on going after your own demise. May you learn that the wicked who profanes our city is you, King of Thebes.
Take this man out of my sight. He is an old, demented man.
You wanted the truth and forced me to say it. Now force yourself to endure the punishments due and welcome the fruits of the curse that you have summoned, because I know the powerful truth, and what is said is said.
Take this traitor away. He can only be in collusion with Prince Creon, who brought this man here to steal my crown. Oedipus accused Creon of treason and conspiracy alongside Tiresias, in attempt to strip him of his power.
Why do you impose such burdensome accusations on me in such a careless way? I have always been your friend and made you king. I don't wish to have your crown, and why would I want to anyway? Standing by your side, I have all the benefits of royalty, without having to assume the heavy burdens of being a king. I never had the ambition to take your crown for myself. Queen Jocasta, who was watching everything, tried to calm the tempers of her husband and brother. However, Creon walked away, furious with Oedipus's accusations.
Husband of mine, don't mind what that old charlatan told you. Those soothsayers and oracles no longer have the power that they once did. It was prophesied that Laius would be killed by his own son, and he died when he was just a baby.
At that point, the arrival of a messenger...
Let's fly. This is not just another streaming app. Noise! This is gripping headlines, gripping drama, and...
from Corinth was announced, from the city where Oedipus's parents still reigned.
My lord, I bring sad news from Corinth. Your old father has died, and for this reason you should return to your beloved city and take your throne as the king's heir.
The news that you give me is sad indeed, but even so, it gives me great relief. The oracle predicted that I would kill my own father, and that I would marry my mother.
You see, Oedipus, the oracle's word is no longer valuable. The old king of Corinth died without your intervention.
But what if my old father died due to the sadness and despair he felt after I decided to abandon him? It's not prudent to return to Corinth and run the risk of ending up married to my mother.
Don't worry, my king. The queen is not your real mother. She simply adopted you.
How do you know such a secret?
Because I was the one who handed you to her when you were just a baby. You were handed to me when I was crossing these lands with my flock. You had your feet pierced.
After hearing what the messenger had said, Jocasta felt a deep tightness in her heart. Would you recognize the man who handed me, if you ever saw him again?
Forget that, Oedipus. Stirring such wounds would only cause more pain.
It's important to me to know the identity of my father and my mother, because I do not want to bring them the misfortune of my prophecy.
Do not insist on going down that path. I beg you.
Like I have to discover the identity of Laius's true murderer. It's my duty to discover the identity of my parents. This is my duty to Thebes and to myself.
All creatures, it is the only that can change its number of legs, but...
My king, the queen is not your real mother. She simply adopted you.
How do you know such a secret?
Because I was the one who handed you to her when you were just a baby.
Then that's how you found out
when I was crossing these lands with my flock. You had your feet pierced.
After hearing what the messenger had said, Jocasta felt a deep tightness in her heart. Would you recognize the man who handed me, if you ever saw him again?
Forget that, Oedipus. Stirring such wounds would only cause more pain.
It's important to me to know the identity of my father and my mother, because I do not want to bring them the misfortune of my prophecy.
Do not insist on going down that path. I beg you.
Like I have to discover the identity of Laius's true murderer. It's my duty to discover the identity of my parents. This is my duty to Thebes and to myself.
Don't you dare, sorrowful one. If you insist, that will be the only title you will carry for the rest of your life.
Jocasta, desolated, crumbled into tears and ran to her room. Oedipus failed to understand the reason of such hysterical reaction from his wife, and believed that Jocasta probably feared the humble origin of his parents, something that could spoil the name of her family. While Oedipus was talking with the messenger, he is informed that the only witness of Laius's murder was brought to the court. The servant of the former king looked pale in front of Oedipus. The messenger told him,
Lord, I have no doubt this is the man who handed you to me when you were just a baby.
Servant, This man says that you handed him a baby many years ago.
Lord, pay no attention to this man. He is just losing your time.
Do you remember that small boy with wounded feet? Now he is in front of you as a king.
Why don't you shut your mouth, you fool?
Who handed you the child? Was it your father?
I don't know what this man is talking about.
If I have to repeat the question, you will be a dead man.
Please, do not harm an old man. I curse that day when I spared your life. It would be better if you were dead.
Speak right away, and end this story.
I beg you, my king, don't ask me anything else.
You will speak the truth, whether you want it or not. Tie him to that trunk.
Considering that threat, I bow before your willingness. Saying this will be really cruel, but your pain as a listener will be even more excruciating. You have been delivered to me by Queen Jocasta, who put in my arms her son with King Laius, so that he could be delivered to the beasts of Mount Citharon to prevent the fulfillment of a terrible prophecy.
During that moment of revelation, light shed on the whole darkness that had blinded the poor Oedipus. His prophecy had been fulfilled. While trying to escape his fate from Corinth, Oedipus in fact crossed paths with it. But Oedipus's full misery had yet to be reached. Queen Jocasta had just committed a desperate act. Oedipus ran toward the royal rooms, but the door was locked. Jocasta, don't do anything that cannot be undone. We are not to blame for what happened. Everything was an inevitability of fate. After forcing the door, Oedipus found Jocasta hanging with a rope around her neck. Oedipus laid the body of the lifeless queen on the floor. He removed the golden brooches that tied her dress and, with their needles, pierced his own eyes. Cursed be my eyes, which have witnessed such a dreadful scene. I therefore mutilate them so that I no longer have to face my parents in the kingdom of Hades. Blind, Oedipus addressed the population of Thebes and said, I have plucked out my own eyes. What can I admire or love in this life now? Take me to exile, far from Thebes, because I'm damned, the most hated creature by the gods among mortals. Oedipus handed his crown to his brother-in-law Creon, who would take care of the kingdom until his children reached the age to reign. Oedipus was given to the Cain of the neglected, and the wretched king was taken by his own children to the city gates. His beloved daughter, Antigone, stretched out her arm and decided to accompany her poor father in exile. For Oedipus, the presence of his daughter at his side could only mean that the gods finally felt sorry for a man so cruelly persecuted since the beginning of his life.
All right, so
Whenever Taco Bell takes them off the
all right, so we're going to end there today. Just let you know what's on the homework for you now that you understand the storyline. You've seen a couple different versions, but the last one was actually an overview of everything in case you didn't quite understand what I was reading or what you're watching from the clicks from the plays or the movies. So the chorus is an effective tool in the time of Sophocles. Find an example of a modern day play like 1960s or present and one film that uses one or more of the characters much the same way. And list the film or play, the year it opened, was released, and the character standing in the Greek chorus, and explain your reasoning with about 5 paragraphs, 25 sentences. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and email that to you, and I will see you next week. I'll be sending you a final test. We'll have one more of these little lectures, and I will actually give you an evaluation as well. Okay, have a wonderful, blessed week. God bless you and all that you do. Bye.